Seduce the Dragon. Read and written by Michelle of UAs-Art. The red dragon bellows out, spewing fire into the ceiling cavern. The goblet of power it consumed gave it a burst of power it had never felt before, though at the expense of its sense and sanity. However, given it had considered even using the goblet at all, perhaps it didn't have much to begin with. Hundreds of bats fall to the floor below, roasted by the flames. The halfling who had escorted here stays hidden behind a rock, with blood oozing from a gash in his arm. He clutches the only weapon he has, a simple knife, knowing there is nothing he can do and is too scared to move. Your cleric lays in a pool of their own blood, death nearing them with every passing second. The half-orc you picked up along the way thrashes against 5 kobolds that claw and bite at him. Finally, there is you, the elf bard. You have no spell slots left, and your crossbow has been crushed by the dragon's last attack. Kyle smirked at his players over the game screen. What do you do? Stan groaned, slumping down in his chair. Roll up a new character sheet. With how the dice are treating me tonight, there's no way I'm going to make this last death saving throw. Kenny set a 4-sided die on top of his growing dice tower. Yeah, these kobolds are fucking me up the ass here. And Jimmy, dude, you are toast. Literally. Jimmy pursed his lips. He rubbed his chin as he examined the game board, laid out before him on the iPad. Yeah, Kyle, you put us in quite the pickle. Kyle rested his chin in his hands. I told you, if any of you play as the characters you always play, I was going to make the game harder. Brought this on yourself, Jimmy. Both Kenny and Stan sent a glare at him, who shrugged it off. His new character wasn't the same elven bard he usually played as. This one didn't have anything to do with royalty, and didn't play the flute. Or, not the metal one, anyway. Though, if things kept going as they were, this new bard was going to have his character sheet ripped up by the end of the night anyway. Jimmy chewed his thumb in thought. Could we pretend at this moment the adrenaline gave me a spell slot? Jimmy asked, knowing full well the answer. Nope. Kyle shook his head, red curls covering his eyes. With a slight huff, he reached up and brushed them aside. As Jimmy watched this, an idea hit him. It was a terrible idea, but if he couldn't figure out another plan, he might not have a choice. What did you say the relic the dragon ate did again? He asked. The goblet of power dropped the dragon's wisdom and intelligence way down, but its strength and speed are doubled. Kyle explained. Translation, Kyle's fucking with us. Stan scooted his chair out. Head into the kitchen. Anyone want anything? Might as well enjoy a soda before these fuckers eat my dick off next turn, Kenny called. Bring me a water, Kyle said. Nothing for me, Jimmy murmured as he rotated the battlefield. Kyle was already upset with him for his bard stunt. If he didn't think of another plan, there was a good chance Kyle would barrel across the table and strangle him. Gotcha, Stan replied as he disappeared into the kitchen. The healing salve the dragon had knocked from his hand last turn was too far away for him to get. He already tried to lull the dragon to sleep, and that plan would have worked if Kenny hadn't run up and tried to punch the dragon in the nose before it was fully lulled. There was no place to hide and no way to help Kenny. He was out of options. Damn it, he grumbled as Stan returned. Stan set one of the cokes he held in front of Kenny and a glass of water down for Kyle. As he did, he tried to peek over all the papers and stats Kyle had, only for Kyle to shoo him away. Jimmy sighed. All right, I know what I want to do. What? Kyle took a drink. I want to... His lips twitched up into a smirk. Seduce the dragon. The dragon master gagged on his water, beating his chest. Beside Jimmy, Kenny began to roar with laughter, slapping his hands on the table. Stan tried to cover his smile, but failed miserably. You... What? Kyle demanded between coughs. I'm gonna try to get me some dragon puss. Jimmy paused. Or dick, I'm not picky. Kyle groaned, rubbing his temples. Cartman leaving the DM position in a huff last month made total sense now. As a player, Kyle never realized how annoying it was to have the players try things like this, or throw a wrench in his plans. He grabbed the Dungeon Master screen and shook it slightly. Kyle, can I give Jimmy advantage on his roll if I play wingman? You're under a mountain of minions! Kyle snapped. I can still yell what a catch Jimmy is. Kenny threw his arm around Jimmy's shoulder. I am totally up to proclaiming how good Jimmy's little Jimmy is. So that's why it took you two so long to come save me when I was kidnapped last session. Stan poked Jimmy in the side. Fuckers. Jimmy smirked, wrapping his arm around Kenny's waist. What we do when you're bound and gagged is none of your business. Kenny jokingly rested his head on his shoulders and stroked his chest. Jimmy snuggled him close, burying his nose in Kenny's hair, earning him a half giggle, half snort. Kyle dragged his hands down his face with a groan. Oh, Lord, how do you plan on doing this? You know the house rules about charming someone into sex. Not that you have a spell slot for charmed person available. Jimmy disentangled himself from Kenny. I'm going to use my wonderful word weaving tongue. He winked. Behind the screen, Kyle shuffled around his papers. He pursed his lip, then unlocked his phone. After a moment of Googling, he sighed. You know what? Fuck it. This game has gone on for the last 4 hours. He threw his hands up. We'll just do a charisma contest. However this ends, it ends. This is the only time I'm letting you try this. But first, show 'em what you got. Flirt your way out of death, Sir Silver Tongue. Jimmy smirked. He leaned forward, resting his chin on his knuckles. He cocked his eyebrow up, eyes glittering with pure mischief. So first is my bonus action. I called to Stan that the healing salve I lost is right next to his hand. So if this fails, he can heal himself. He held up his finger and wagged it. What? You couldn't have told me that a death save ago? Stan rolled his eyes. Hush, Stan. You still have to be a death saving throw before you can use it anyway. Kyle pointed his pencil at Stan's nose. I'm gonna write it into my inventory anyway. If Jimmy fails, we're dead no matter what I roll. Stan replied, snatching the pencil from his hands. Jimmy cleared his throat before continuing. Okay, so I walk forward, pull out my lute, and begin to softly play as I flash my $1 million lady, man, non-binary person killing smile. The light glinted off his braces as he grinned at Kyle. Trying to stifle a chuckle, Stan pulled up a YouTube video of lute music on his phone and set it down on the table. Kyle shot him a glare. He did not turn off the video. I do a spin so the dragon can get a good look at my fine form, Jimmy said. Then I wink at him. Then, in the most suave voice possible, I say to him, why, hello there, my fine, flaming friend. Kenny snorted, nearly sending his drink from his nose. Kyle rolled his hand for Jimmy to go on. Since the moment I stepped into this cave and set my elven eyes on your scarlet scales, I knew I just had to get to know you close and personal. Jimmy scooted further up in his chair to lean across the table. You're just so awe-inspiring and kind-hearted and wickedly smart. It would make me the happiest bard in the world if you would do me the honor of a date. From under the kobold orgy, I yell. Kenny coughed into his hands before he dropped his voice a few pitches. You would be remiss to pass Jimmy up. He is the funniest guy in the world. I wouldn't pass him up if I were you. Stan's hands fell into his arms, his shoulders shaking with uncontrollable laughter. Kyle snorted. I should make you roll persuasion, since that was all a lie. Jimmy fixed Kyle with a sincere look. I wasn't lying. The gears in Kyle's head ground together a moment before Jimmy's words clicked. He rolled his eyes. You're seducing the dragon, Jimmy, not me. Can't I do both? Jimmy asked in mock disappointment. Kyle shook his head. Just roll charisma, so I can kick you all out and take a shower. Jimmy slumped back in his chair. He plucked his D20 from the middle of Kenny's dice tower. The tower toppled, sending dice across the table. Kenny scrambled to snatch the D8 that rolled off the table before setting it on top of his character sheet. With a grin, Jimmy held out the die flat on his palm to Kenny. Good luck kiss, wingman? He asked. Of course. Kenny kissed his fingers before tapping them to the 20 on the die. Good luck, for all our sakes. Jimmy began to shake the die in his hands. He scrunched up his face before throwing the die across the table. It hit the Game Master screen, then bounced back in front of Jimmy. Stan and Kenny leaned forward, blocking Kyle's view. A wide, cheeky grin spread across the players' faces. With a glare, Kyle said, "I swear to God, if that's a natural 20, I'm going to shove your crutches down your throat." Jimmy gave an impish smile. "It's a 19. Plus his charisma modifier. You'll have to beat, what, a 25? Yeah, a 25. Stan peeked around Jimmy's arm and his character sheet. Kyle let out a cry of frustration. Without a word, he reached for his die. It clattered against the screen after he threw it. Kyle stared down it before heaving a sigh. "What is it? Please say it's a critical fail." Kenny bounced in his seat. Kyle glowered over the game screen. "It's a 2. A roar of excitement shook the tables from the players. Rounds of high fives were exchanged as Kyle hid his face in his hands. He dragged his fingers through his curls. "All right, so by some miracle of whatever god you pray to, this dragon, who literally wanted to kill you 10 seconds ago, is suddenly very interested in you and wants to take you up on your offer. It grabs you by the middle and takes you to the back of the cave where there is a large opening to the world above. It flies up, and you two go on the most romantic date the kingdom has ever seen. Oh, and before it leaves, it coughs up the goblet. The halfling you were escorting scurries out, snatches it, and scurries away." "What about the kobolds?" Kenny cut in. "They see their leader leaving and climb off you. Before you can even stand up, the kobolds wander back off into their tunnels." Kyle stood and reached over the game screen to grab the iPad. "So you two chucklefucks get to wait there and take a long rest while Jimmy fucks a dragon. Game over for today." He pointed towards the door. "Go home." Stan handed Jimmy his crutches, then began to help Kyle pick up the table. Kenny stood and stretched. He took a few steps backwards to the window to pull back the curtains. "I'm going to go start the truck." He took his keys from his pocket before tossing them up and snatching them from the air. "Be back." Don't die," Jimmy joked as he pushed himself up. "No promises." Kenny laughed as he left. Jimmy swung his head around, more to stretch his neck muscles than to look around for Kyle and Stan, who were still in the kitchen chatting. This was the first break they'd taken in the past 2 hours. In that time, Jimmy knew he drank probably more than 1 bladder full of soda. Without the game to distract him, his bladder had his full attention. As Jimmy headed towards the bathroom, he passed Kyle's seat. He paused a moment, looking towards the kitchen. He couldn't see Kyle, but Stan had jumped up on the counter, so in all likelihood, Kyle wasn't going to come out for a few minutes. Taking a reprieve from his mission to relieve himself, Jimmy turned to snoop around Kyle's plans. Behind the screen, Kyle's laptop sat in the corner. He had the website they used for the battle map pulled up on half the screen, and another map of the entirety of the cave on the other. Jimmy then found 2 stacks of paper, with the same monsters and traps, but one had higher stats and difficulty than the other. The lower stat papers must have been what Kyle planned on using had Jimmy not tried to troll him with his elf bard. After a quick scan of the higher stats, Jimmy was surprised his party made it as far as they did without any of them dying. His eyes slid across the table towards Kyle's dice bag and his D20. Before his brain could process what he saw, Kenny threw open the door. Jimmy jumped back from the screen, pretending he was instead reading over Stan's notes. "It's a good thing we all have to get cozy in the front seat, 'cause my heater is going out again," Kenny announced, snow falling off his shoulders. Stan hopped off the counter and walked over and poked his head into the kitchen. "I thought you got that thing fixed." "Kevin and I did have it fixed," Kenny defended. Stan made a show of zipping up his jacket to his chin and pulling his hat down over his ears. Kenny mock-punched him in the shoulder. "Just get in the truck, Stanley," Kenny ordered. Jimmy chewed the inside of his cheek for a moment before coughing into his hand. Actually, fellas, if it's okay with Kyle," he started, "could I stay here? Roll up a new character for next time." "New character?" Stan raised an eyebrow. "I think I'd rather play as someone else for the rest of the campaign. My bard's gonna be sore after what he and that dragon do to each other," Jimmy explained. "Would that be alright, Kyle? My dad's working at the fire station. He could pick me up." Kyle grinned. "Sure, dude. Anything to get you out of your archetypes." Kenny slung his arm around Stan's shoulder, then raised a leg up to press it against Stan's stomach. "Guess it's just you and me getting all close the 3-minute drive to your house," Kenny teased. Stan snorted, grabbing Kenny's leg with one hand and wrapping the other around his shoulders. Jimmy chuckled as the two shambled their way out the door, only for Stan to slam his spine into the doorframe and drop Kenny forward. Kenny scrambled to his feet and brushed his pants off coolly. Shooting finger guns at Kyle and Jimmy, he walked backwards into the snowy night. Stan rubbed his back and shot one finger gun at them.
I'll make sure Kenny texts you when he gets home,
Stan promised.
Night, dudes.
He shut the door as he left. After a moment, the headlights of Kenny's truck shone through the window as he pulled out.
I'm gonna run to the bathroom.
Jimmy jabbed his thumb towards the hall. Kyle nodded as he headed back into the kitchen. When Jimmy had returned from his bladder's quest, he noticed that Kyle had put all his dice in their bag and set them on his closed laptop. Jimmy sat back into his seat as Kyle came down the stairs, probably from his room. Kyle slipped behind his screen, then fished out a clean character sheet, then took Stan's old seat. He laid the sheet down, smoothing out the corners. Okay, so I'm banning you from being a bard or any elf, half or otherwise, Kyle began. If you want to round out the party, I would suggest a spell sling.
You got a natural 20.
Jimmy cut in. Kyle raised an eyebrow. What?
You fudged the last roll. I saw your die.
Jimmy stated in a deadpan.
You rolled a 20. I know dragons have a high enough charisma to beat my roll.
Kyle's mouth gaped open a moment before he nervously said, but the goblet reduced
its intelligence and wisdom. Charisma was unaffected.
Kyle chewed his lower lip. He ran his hand through his hair, and a heavy sigh escaped his mouth. Okay, you caught me, but look, Jimmy, I couldn't let you guys lose. Kyle leaned forward on his elbows. It's taken me weeks to get Stan and Kenny to step out of their comfort zones for this. If you guys died 2 sessions in, they might have given up and gone back to being a fighter and an archer again. Jimmy frowned, shaking his head.
Both of them were having fun, even if we were losing. We both know that.
Kyle squirmed in his seat, refusing to meet his eyes. Jimmy watched him for a few heartbeats before his deadpan broke into a wide smile.
You know what I think, Kyle?
Jimmy leaned closer, wrapping his arm around Kyle's back and pulling him closer to whisper into his ear. You liked my flirting and wanted to reflect that without the others knowing. Kyle's face grew bright red as he sat in stunned silence. His mouth gaped open again. Without thinking about it, Kyle began to lean away only to fall backwards out of his chair. Jimmy gasped, tightening his grip around his back, and kept him from hitting the floor.
Are you okay?
Shit, dude, Kyle stammered. That's not, He dropped his head to the table. Maybe that was a little bit of it. Jimmy blinked in surprise. His own cheeks started to turn pink. Jimmy took a deep breath and calmed himself. He had to approach this carefully. Not too funny because Kyle might think he was playing him, and not too serious, or that would be much too boring for the best comedian South Park has.
Well, Kyle, I'm flattered, but I have to admit...
Jimmy winked.
If I knew you were into it, I would have brought out that amazing ass of yours.
Kyle snorted. So are you retroactively asking me on a date? Jimmy shrugged.
Sure, I've already got all the flirting and ego stroking out of the way, right?
Kyle picked up his pencil and began to spin it between his fingers. Is this going to be one of your infamous dates that's actually you taking someone to your own show as a seat filler? Or a real date? Jimmy lifted his shoulder in a half shrug.
Can't it be both? You're horrible.
Kyle chuckled, giving the slightest snort at the end. I'll make a deal with you. Make a character that isn't a bard or an elf or anything like those two, and I'll say yes. Jimmy playfully screwed up his face in thought before bobbing his head.
Deal.
With that, the two scooted closer to each other to roll up a new character.